Hello, my name is Michelle Grimolia, and I am the President and CEO here at Woodland Pond at New Paltz. The purpose of this presentation is to let residents, prospective residents, family members, loved ones, and representatives have a little bit of inside information about what to expect related to certain aspects of care here at the community in each level of care. So I'm going to be focusing on the criteria that apply for each level of care, emergency response procedures in each level of care, and a little bit about how our processes here at the community work. I'm going to be drawing from a number of existing policies that are both internal to Woodland Pond, our resident handbook, policies and procedures, and as well some New York State materials as well. I will reference each of these as I go through the presentation. So first, I'm going to begin with independent living. And I'd like to start with outlining the criteria for which a resident or prospective resident is assessed to determine if they are appropriate for independent living here at the community. These criteria are established by Woodland Pond and differ from one community to another, I would think. So here at Woodland Pond, the following criteria exist, and I'm going to read these right from our criteria policy. In order to remain in independent living, a resident must be able to complete all of the following activities of daily living, also referenced as ADLs, without the assistance of another, including not requiring assistance for cueing or prompting by a family member, a paid caregiver, or other supportive individual. So one must be able to do these on their own in order to qualify for independent living. Medication management, management of medical care, showering, bathing, and adherence to appropriate standards of hygiene, dressing, meaning that your clothing is appropriate for the situation and properly worn, using the toilet in a safe, appropriate, and hygienic manner, managing your incontinence, appropriately managing vision or hearing loss, meal preparation in your residence, being able to ambulate without the assistance of another person, being able to transfer without the assistance of another person, requesting emergency assistance by demonstrating the ability and desire to use your PERS and telephone independently to request assistance. I'm going to talk about a lot of criteria today, but as it relates to independent living, this is probably the single most important criteria our team utilizes when determining if someone is appropriate for independent living or not. And although it's a long sentence and talks about being able to request emergency assistance using your PERS, which is your personal emergency response system, and your phone, the bottom line to us is, will this person know what to do in the event of an emergency, and can they do so? When all else fails, that's what we look at to ensure that someone is appropriate for independent living. Going on, the use of an assistive device for walking, such as a walker or wheelchair, your ability to safely egress in the event of a fire or an emergency. So do you know where to go in the event of a fire or an emergency? Your ability to evacuate independently, and that you know where to go and can ambulate independently, including on stairs. The person must be able to demonstrate a cognitive capacity at an independent living level, specifically having the ability to self-direct and initiate activities without cues or supervision from another person. The person must be oriented to time, place, and person. The person must be able to manage their own schedule, including doctor's appointments and transportation needs without assistance. The person must be able to manage their own finances and legal matters without assistance. And last, the person must be able to act in a manner appropriate for community living as follows. They must maintain a safe and healthful personal space for the benefit of their self and others, a clean house, a safe living space. The person must recognize the need for safety and security of their neighbors in the community. The person must behave appropriately in public, and the person must act in a humane and healthful manner. So those are the main criteria for someone to be able to reside here in independent living at Woodland Pond. The next thing I'd like to talk about as it relates very specifically to the item that I indicated was our biggest concern, relates to emergency service. So in independent living, we have a resident handbook, and everyone should have received a copy of this when they've moved into the community. And you can certainly request a copy ahead of time too, so that you can understand the different policies in place. We have a handbook in place in every level of care at Woodland Pond. And for this section, I will be reading from the independent living resident handbook. So we've got a section, this handbook is dated January of 2019, and all of the policies in this still apply. The section entitled Emergency Service, which starts on page 39, has two sections. So there are two components to our emergency service program here in independent living. The first is the Personal Emergency Response System, or PERS system, and the second is reference to the New Paltz Rescue Squad. So I will read directly from the policy as to the components of emergency service in independent living. Section A, Personal Emergency Response System, or PERS. Every residence is equipped with an emergency response system, and every resident is provided with a personal emergency response system, or PERS, pendant. The emergency response system uses wireless technology that works in your residence in all common areas, including the fitness center, community center, health center, and restrooms. You are encouraged to wear your pendant at all times, with the exception of while bathing, showering, using the swimming pool, or when exposed to inclement weather. The pendants are not waterproof or water resistant. When activated, a signal is sent to Woodland Pond emergency response staff. If you have an emergency or need medical assistance, activate your pendant or the PERS pull cord located in either of your bathrooms if you have two, or in your main bath if you have just one bathroom, and a staff member will respond promptly. And those staff members respond 24/7 once beckoned through your pendant or through your wall pull cord. Woodland Pond emergency response staff has a key to access your residence. Staff members will respond to an emergency involving a guest on the property and may provide basic first aid. However, visitors should be referred to the nearest urgent care clinic or emergency room in any medical situation. Please report any lost PERS or broken pendants to the concierge. There is substantial repair or replacement fee. The concierge will notify you or the resident when the battery needs to be replaced, and you may also check with the concierge to make sure that your PERS battery is operating. So we get system reports to let us know that the PERS is working properly, and we are responsible for changing those batteries. Again, this is all strictly related to independent living. The next component of emergency service here at Woodland Pond in independent living relates to the New Paltz Rescue Squad, and reads as follows. Local emergency medical technicians, or EMTs, are located less than half a mile from Woodland Pond and can be reached by calling 911. Alternatively, you can call concierge and we can alert New Paltz Rescue Squad for you as well. They're able to get into the building. They know exactly where to go. They're here all the time. So they're our, best way to get emergency response. The next section talks a little bit more about that. And this is section 30, which starts on page 57. And this again is in the Independent Living Handbook. And this is entitled Resident Emergency Packets in Case of Incapacity. EMS and hospital personnel need current information in order to provide emergency medical care. To support that requirement, you have been provided with an envelope to be kept inside your corner kitchen cabinet. A copy of your health insurance cards, emergency contact sheet, healthcare proxy, power of attorney, physical history and summary form, and a medication list will be kept in the envelope. We would also encourage anyone to include a MOLST, or a medical orders for life-sustaining treatment form issued by New York State and signed off by your doctor that provides your end-of-life wishes or your life-sustaining wishes, whichever you choose. In the event of an emergency hospitalization, the EMS will take this information with them. It is critical that you keep this information in the envelope up to date and notify our wellness RNs of any changes. When a resident goes to the hospital or any other health facility, they may wish to have this information shared with other residents, And in order for staff to share that information, the resident must complete a health information release form and return it to the concierge. So that's a little bit more of a continuation on emergency response. The next thing that I would like to discuss is something that is a courtesy system here at the community. It's something that is administered primarily by our concierge staff. And this is called our courtesy check system. And again, this relates specifically to independent living. This can be found on page 12 and 13 of your resident handbook. And this is entitled Courtesy Check System. The concierge desk will do a daily courtesy check on all residents in independent living. What this means is that every resident in independent living will be accounted for every day. The checklist at the concierge desk will be initialed by the staff member who talks to, witnesses, or checks the away sheet for each resident. If a resident is not initialed off or checked off by 9 p.m. on any given day, we will dispatch maintenance to their apartment to check in. If the resident is not in their apartment, a message is left for overnight security staff and morning concierge staff to make it a priority to check on them first thing. If a resident is planning on being away from Woodland Pond for a longer period of time than 24 hours, we request that you notify the concierge and complete a resident notification of absence form. The form includes information regarding the date of departure, the return date, and a phone number where you can be reached if someone needs to be contacted in the event of an emergency. Please return the completed form to the concierge so that security, maintenance, housekeeping, and dining services will be aware that you will be away. Residents should not go into the basement alone unless they have notified concierge when they are going to the basement and again when they return. So that's a little bit more about the courtesy check system. I would like to point out, as it relates to all of those areas that we've just discussed, so primarily the emergency response and the courtesy check system, you will see in there that there are certain steps that Woodland Pond will take when activated or when required by our policy. But what you don't see is an explanation of a requirement to, for example, look for someone off campus if they're not in their apartment, or to contact family members if you're not in your apartment or cottage when we do the courtesy check. This is an independent living setting, and I can't emphasize that enough. So your handbook explains all of the amenities and the options that are available to you. But at the end of the day, this is a non-political setting. It's a social setting. And while we do have certain programs in place to help you in the event of an emergency, it really is very important that you're here and you understand that this is an independent living setting. And that's why those criteria that I went through at the beginning of the conversation really emphasize your ability to act independently and act appropriately, especially in the event of an emergency. So that's a very, very key distinction in independent living. We talk about it a lot as a community. And when we talk as a team, an interdisciplinary team, every Tuesday at 11:15 a.m. about which residents may not be meeting those criteria or meeting criteria for assisted living or our memory care unit or skilled nursing, we are applying these criteria that we have in place, and we apply them across the board. So it's really important that you understand that independent living, while we do offer many services and amenities, ultimately is an independent living setting. So if we have any concerns at any time that someone is unable to meet those criteria, particularly related to safety and emergency response, that's when we're going to be starting a conversation with the resident or with a family member about a potential transition to a higher level of care. So now that we've covered independent living, I'd like to talk a bit about assisted living. So when I refer to assisted living, this is our entire assisted living program, which includes our general assisted living and our memory care support assisted living areas of the community. And in order to be considered for assisted living, a resident must meet the following criteria. They must be able to transfer without a mechanical lift. They must be able to manage bowel and urinary incontinence with or without assistance. They must be able to evacuate via stairs in the event of an emergency, even if on their bottom. They must be able to access medical care and services and comply with the prescribed treatment. They must be able to demonstrate that he or she is able to call for assistance when needed. They must be able to independently manage oxygen and other equipment. and must behave in a manner that is not likely to cause danger to oneself or others. So this is very much a social model, and those are our criteria of the folks that we initially will consider appropriate for assisted living. New York State has a separate set of admission and retention standards, and this is very specific to the assisted living setting. And I'm going to read through these so that folks can understand. This is from New York State Section 487.4 of the applicable code. And this is the criteria that's in effect for us to be able to consider who can stay in assisted living once folks are there. An operator shall not retain or accept any person that is in need of continual medical or nursing care or supervision as provided by facilities licensed as a skilled nursing facility or hospital in New York State. We may not retain or admit any person that suffers from a serious and persistent mental disability sufficient to warrant placement in a residential facility licensed accordingly under the mental hygiene law. We shall not accept or retain any person that requires health or mental health services which are not available or cannot be provided safely or effectively by local service agencies or providers. We shall not accept or retain any person who causes or is likely to cause danger to himself or others. We shall not retain or accept any person that repeatedly behaves in a manner which directly impairs the well-being, care, or safety of the resident or other residents, or which substantially interferes with the orderly operation of the facility. We shall not accept or retain any person that has a medical condition which is unstable and which requires continual skilled observation of symptoms and reactions or accurate recording of such skilled observations for the purposes of reporting to the resident's physician. We shall not accept or retain someone that refuses or is unable to comply with a prescribed treatment program, including but not limited to prescribed medication regimen when such failure causes or is likely to cause, in the judgment of a physician, life-threatening danger to the resident or others. We cannot retain anyone that accept or retain anyone that is chronically bedfast, is chronically chair-fast and unable to transfer, or chronically requires the physical assistance of another person to transfer, or chronically requires the physical assistance of another person in order to walk, or chronically requires the physical assistance of another person to climb or descend stairs, unless assignment on a ground floor with where ground level egress can be made. We may not retain or admit anyone that has chronic unmanaged urinary or bowel incontinence, suffers from a communicable disease or health condition which constitutes a danger to their self or others, is dependent on medical equipment, unless it has been determined that the equipment presents no safety hazard. We are not able to retain or admit anyone that engages in alcohol or drug use, which results in aggressive or destructive behavior. And finally, we cannot retain or admit anyone that is under 18 years of age or in a public adult home, which we don't have, which would be under 16. So we don't have that. So we can't have anybody that's under 18. So those are the admission and retention criteria for assisted living. And just as we had spoken about the criteria for independent living and then the emergency response, I'll speak a little bit about the emergency response in assisted living. So in assisted living, we do have nurses on staff, licensed practical nurses, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. However, in New York State, a licensed practical nurse, which is all of the only type of nurse that's currently permitted for the bulk of that unit, is unable to do something that's called an assessment. So by licensure, their scope of practice does not allow them to assess a condition. So an LPN can observe a condition, may observe that a resident has fallen, may observe that there does not appear to be, let's say, a skin tear or a noticeable injury, but they're not able to assess that. So that LPN, which is our, 24/7 level of care, in addition to the certified nursing assistants in assisted living, that LPN must take a next step to have the resident condition assessed. So there are two ways that this can happen. If there seems to be a pending emergency, that LPN is going to contact the New Paltz Rescue Squad, just as would happen here in independent living, with the difference being that in independent living, the resident would initiate the call to EMS. In assisted living, a resident could initiate that call, but more typically, it's our licensed practical nurses or LPNs that are doing that. So they would contact EMS. EMS would come over and provide the assessment, do what they needed to do, and determine if somebody needed to be transported to the hospital, and so forth. The alternative is, if it's not an emergency type situation, the LPN will contact the resident's physician in the community, because when you are in assisted living, you retain your physician in the community. You do not have on-site medical staff, just as you do not in independent living. Again, assisted living here in New York, in the licensure that we have, is not a medical setting. It is not a clinical setting. It's considered to be a social setting that is supported by LPNs and certified nursing assistants. But all of the orders for the care that you receive in assisted living, all of the updated orders that a physician might put in place following an emergent issue or something that an LPN reports, all of those things are controlled by the physician on the outside of the community, and we are strictly following those orders. So again, we do not have the ability to assess those conditions in assisted living because there are no registered nurses present. The third level of care that we have here at the community is called skilled nursing, also referred to as residential healthcare facility, our HCF, under New York State regulations. And here on our campus, that is the highest level of care. So those residents that do not meet the criteria for both independent living and assisted living would be considered for admission to skilled nursing. So our skilled nursing environment provides things such as, of course, medication management, as we do in assisted living, all of your assistance with your activities of daily living, and also a significant amount more of assessment, medical assessment, and treatment than what is allowed to happen in assisted living. And this is because we have registered nurses and a medical director present or available on skilled nursing at all times. So there we are able to basically do all of the highest level of care that you would anticipate in a facility that is licensed, like Woodland Pond is, for that level of care. We do not have a vent unit, so we are not able to care for anyone that has a ventilator or needs a ventilator. We are not a skilled nursing dementia unit. Those are specified. There are certain licensures that very specialized care is provided in within skilled nursing within New York State, and Woodland Pond just has a general skilled nursing licensure. So we don't have some of those specialty nuanced things. It's a very small unit. We are really here to provide that highest level in the continuum of typical care of a senior person. But there are certain limits to what we can do. But generally speaking, I can't remember a time that we've ever had to discharge somebody out. We've never had a vent, knock on wood, here at Woodland Pond, a need for a vent. We can do a number of things here at the community, but anything that is outside of our licensure, of course, we would work with the resident and their family to find a location that would allow them to receive that level of care should it be needed. Now, the emergency response in skilled nursing is, again, different from what it was described as in independent living and in assisted living. But in skilled nursing, we, of course, have call bells, as we do in assisted living. And I failed to mention that. There are a call bell system in assisted living, which contacts the nursing staff and the aides that you need help. The same thing happens in skilled nursing. So there are ways that you can call for help using the call bell system. Some residents do actually keep their PERS pendant that they had in independent living if they're able to use that when they get into the health center, and those can beckon for help as well. But once help is beckoned for in skilled nursing, and it's determined that this is not an issue of an activity of daily living, but truly a medical issue or a concern, the very first thing that's going to happen is an LPN may observe what's happened and beckon the registered nurse, or if the doctor happens to be there at the time, will come in and respond to the emergency. The registered nurse can assess and then determine what the next steps would be. And the next steps are really dictated in large part in skilled nursing and across the campus, but mainly in skilled nursing by your advanced directives. So that nurse is going to know based on a bracelet that you're wearing and other notation about what your advanced directives are. So do you want to be hospitalized in the event of an emergency? Do you want to be intubated? Do you want to have resuscitation provided for you or attempted for you? All of those things the nurse already knows. And that is because we have your advanced directives on file and we've documented them, we've checked them, we've reconciled them, and we continue to update them if you change your mind. So depending on what your advanced directives are, if you've initiated or acknowledged that you wish to have, for example, what's called or referred to as a full code status. So if something was to happen and you became unconscious, unresponsive, if you've selected a full code status, that means you want every life-saving measure that is available to be performed for you. And that's the case everywhere. So if you have medical orders for life-sustaining treatment, which is your MOLST form, and you've indicated that you want to have, a full code, or if you have no other advanced directives, automatically it's going to default that we think that you want to be have resuscitation attempted. So here at the community, we do not use automatic defibrillators. They're not standard practice here in our setting, in independent living and assisted living or skilled. If the resuscitation is your desire, that resuscitation is primarily going to be attempted manually. And that's typical. We do have tools and techniques, especially in skilled nursing, that assists with that. A fully equipped crash cart that has the different diagnostic tools and assistive tools to provide that manual resuscitation. But essentially, if someone was found to be unconscious, unresponsive, and we knew that this person wished for resuscitation, that resuscitation would begin immediately by the clinical staff that are here and present. So that would be chest compressions, and I'm not exactly sure right now. The protocols seem to change quite a bit about whether or not mouth-to-mouth resuscitation is indicated or not, but the chest compression certainly would start. And while that's happening, another staff member would be contacting EMS. EMS squad would come over, and normally what happens is they would either take over the manual resuscitation or they would participate in it as well as a swap out, because it is a lengthy process oftentimes. So that's very important for everyone to know. Here in independent living or in assisted living, again, there are no automatic defibrillators. Everything is based on your advanced directive. So if you have an emergency in independent living, and somebody finds you, let's say, unconscious, unresponsive, we're going to go to your emergency packet in the closet, and we're going to let EMS know this person is do not resuscitate, or this person wishes for a full code status and wishes for resuscitation. So it's very, very important at every level of care that we know exactly what your advanced directives are. So if you have not completed or have not reviewed your advanced directives, or your also known as your MOLST form, it's a hot pink form. If you haven't looked at that recently, or if you haven't completed one, you really should do that. We're really going to be encouraging everyone that comes into Woodland Pond to have that completed at the time that they move in, because it's so critical. We need to know what your wishes are, and certainly can provide education as to what each of those choices in that document mean. So that's just a little bit about the different levels of service here at the community in terms of focusing on criteria for retention and admission, and then also emergency response in each setting. As always, I'm reachable directly at my desk at 845-256-5501. Again, that is 845-256-5501. You can get me on my email, which is mgramolia, spelled GRAMOGLIA, at WPATNP.org. Or stopping by my office. I have an open door policy. As long as I am in and available, you are welcome to come and see me, and we can talk through any questions that you have on any of this. But I hope this was helpful and gives you a little bit of a picture and an idea of what to expect related to admission criteria and retention criteria and emergency response here at Woodland Pond. Thank you.